In real life, a fragile ceasefire between occupier and occupied in Gaza, already broken multiple times by the occupier, and while its colonial violence continues unabated in the West Bank, so too does the exchange of hostages, and for many, a return to what's left of their homes. But here in Planet Zoo, the occupation has long been ended, and Palestine has long been liberated. Here, Palestinians are free to build anew. In the first episode, we created an entrance building for our zoo, and off-camera, I added this modest food court with umbrellas and awnings to provide lots of shade from the Middle Eastern sun. It serves burgers, Nat'l of course, as well as juice, ice cream, and slushies. In the first episode, we also built a habitat for the critically endangered rollaway monkey. I added this species to the game using a mod. Created by someone appropriately named Mega Kebab. And they've already had babies. In addition, I built a gibbon habitat, although I accidentally deleted the recording. To help me build, I found a care manual for the Lara gibbon, but it said that they're actually so common in captivity that they're being phased out of zoos in favor of the even more endangered white-cheeked gibbon. So that's what we have here, again using a mod. Gibbons are best kept in breeding pairs and need an enclosure that's more long than wide, so they have lots of space to brachiate, meaning swing along with their arms. But here they usually just run around on two legs or hang around like this. Today we'll build habitats for two more ape species, orangutans and chimpanzees. Welcome back to the Palestine National Zoo. And before we get started, just a reminder that liking, commenting, and subscribing tell YouTube and me that you enjoy this kind of content and want to see more of it. So thank you. Orangutans are known as quite solitary animals, especially in comparison to the other primates. But they actually have pretty complex social structures. And multiple orangutans can be housed together as long as they each have enough space. And the Zoopedia's recommendation is pretty much in line with the care manual by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. We should be safe with one male, two females, and their young. The care manual recommends concrete as a barrier, since not only can orangutans climb, but they're actually quite strong. And, of course, very smart, so a secondary barrier is recommended. We'll go with hot wire here. And because guests can sometimes not be that smart, we'll create a pretty sturdy barrier for them too. Rather than build a climbing structure from scratch, I'll go through the Steam workshop and see if I can find one that I like. I'll try this one. And then I'll change my mind. This one uses wooden planks to create what looks like ropes, but I'll need to trim it back since it's too close to the edge. And I'll steal some features from the other climbing structure, like this netting, and some hammocks. From what I understand, primates need some unstable surfaces. I'll add some more of these beams for climbing, but only realized later that the orangutans won't brachiate on it. And I don't think this rope is actually sturdy enough to withstand orangutans. So for this rope bridge across the path, I'll use wooden planks to create the rope, just like in the climbing structure. But getting the orangutans to actually use this thing will end up being a huge headache. I'll also add a few trees, but in real life, orangutans would probably destroy all but the very strongest ones in their enclosure. Instead of the simple mesh doors I created for the other habitats, here I decide to go with these heavy wooden sliding doors that I found on the workshop. But I'll have to remove any pieces that might allow the orangutans to climb them. Then we can add a floor for the indoor areas. We'll need to get rid of that long grass though. And I'll just copy this structure over from the monkey habitat. Adding a hallway here will create a secondary security area. Next, we'll draw null barriers around all the areas the orangutans should be able to access. Put in a habitat door. And make sure the staff can access it, so that they can deliver our first orangutan, Kayono. Now, because orangutans in the game spend much more time on the ground than they would in reality, we need to find a clever way to discourage them from coming down here. These saltwort bushes do a great job. Even if I sink them down into the ground to look like grass, the orangutans still can't walk here. Mixing together the green ones with the dry ones creates a more realistic look, keeping in mind the climate here. Since we're in sandbox mode, we can go into the animal settings and disable terrain need, as well as plant need, so that they're not negatively affected by the lack of traversable terrain, or the fact that some of the plants in their habitat aren't from their native region. They still need some enrichment though. Since orangutans in the wild spend most of their time foraging, this forage box would be a good idea, but it's currently inaccessible. We'll need to remove some of these saltwort plants. I got Kayono a lady friend, but it looks like she has arrived injured. Better call a vet. I'll then add a log wall exterior to cover up the concrete and make sure that this habitat matches the rest of the area. And get to work on the other side of the guest path, so that the orangutans have a reason to use that bridge. I'll make this their playroom. All the toy enrichments are in here. And it finally looks like they might actually be able to climb this. And here comes the big guy now. No, wait, never mind. Alright, now he's going for it. Oh, nope, no he's not. Okay, so it's only in this rainstorm that he actually decides to make the crossing. Is that all? That's all. So we have one male, two females, and our first baby. This area seemed too empty, but I figured they might do animal talks here eventually, so I added some seating for that. And with that, it's time to move on to our next habitat for chimpanzees. For them, the Animal Care Guide recommends at least 3 males and 5 females, assuming there's enough space for them. How much space do they need? A group of 5 should have at least 186 square meters and a vertical height of over 6.1 meters. Another 93 square meters should be added for each additional chimpanzee. That doesn't seem like all that much space. In fact, For a group of 14 adults and their offspring, these researchers suggest 425 cubic meters. If we assume a height of 8 meters, that's only 53 square meters in area. Is that really enough? Well, more space is generally better, but the Zoopedia recommends much more space than that. Now, if we go with the recommended minimum of 3 males and 5 females, then 620 square meters should be plenty in real life. So we'll actually start by copying and pasting our gibbon habitat, and then adding part of our monkey habitat. Of course, we'll need to trim off a few pieces and add some more. In order to get this wall to line up perfectly with the edge of the cage, I'll break it off into its own group. As I did in the orangutan habitat, I'll create a large implied backstage area for staff facilities here, and line the interior with concrete. We can just extend this section, like so. And then I realized that the log walls and the concrete walls have been placed in the same spot on the grid. So again, I'll need to break this off into its own group. We can then add some interior walls, again made from concrete. And copy this over. And I'll copy these walls all the way around as well. Later, I'll lower them a little, just so that they're not blocking the view of the guests. Although, since chimps spend more time on the ground than some other primates, it might make more sense to raise the ground up. Anyway, I'll continue covering up the metal poles on the lady designer's cage with these wooden logs. Working on this habitat, which is largely pieced together from other habitats in the zoo, showed me some imperfections in those other habitats that I'll go back and fix. Because chimps are also quite strong and very smart, I'll use the same wooden sliding door as in the orangutan habitat and separate the outdoor area in two, just in case beefing groups of chimps need to be split up. I really like this small animal door by Masani that I found on the workshop, although I'll need to modify it a little bit, and I'm not sure that the chimps actually will fit through in-game. We can imagine these might be animal transfer doors, and we'll leave them open most of the time, since we need to make sure the chimps have multiple ways to get in and out, so that some of them can't block the way for others. I'll try using a few different pieces to fill in the gaps here, but this log wall door is perfect. We can use this twilight lantern chain to hold the doors open. And then I'll put in some concrete flooring. I sometimes forget that you can change the size and height of the grid. Here I'll do some more copy and pasting. Although I'll expand this structure a little bit to make room for more chimps. Once again, we've got to make sure they have climbing opportunities while they're indoors. And realistically, there should be enrichment in here too, but for the purposes of the game, we'll place all the enrichment outside to keep the chimps in view of the guests. Again, we're not going to worry too much about areas that are out of view of the public. That being said, we can add a few details, like some ladders. Time to trace out the null barriers. Again, we've got to make sure to include all the areas that can be accessed by the animals. And I'll try to get only the areas that can be accessed by the animals so that the total area indicated when you select the habitat is more or less accurate. Let's make some minor adjustments to the barrier so that the habitat gate fits perfectly in this doorway. And again, make sure the staff can get to it. They can walk through scenery pieces, of course, but adding some doors here will make things look just a little more realistic. Back at the gibbon habitat, we can see how I managed to fill in the necessary space between the animal barrier and the guest barrier with plants, as well as these planted wood panels and these classic flower beds. Flipping them upside down reveals a soil that helps fill in any unsightly gaps in the terrain. Then I'll copy this fence piece so I can continue it over here. For chimps, humans' closest relatives in the animal kingdom, the complexity of the habitat seems to be more important than the size, so I figured I'd give them a little pool. Even though chimps can't really swim, the pool needs to be less than 0.6 meters deep. I'll build it with these concrete pieces and fill it with water. That's a little too much. The simplest solution is just to raise the pool up. And then remove the water so that I can fix the terrain around it afterwards. Of course, there are pools among the enrichment items, but I don't know if the chimps will actually use them. So let's place one and find out for sure. Bun Me doesn't have great genes, but she'll do. And here she comes. Nope, she doesn't even know it's there. We'll have to improve her welfare. One issue seems to be that the wooden trim at the base of these doorways is preventing them from being able to walk through. Simply deleting them seems to eliminate the problem. But so does lowering them a little bit and raising the ground around them. Yet Bunmi's welfare is so low that we have protesters. Let's get her back to the Animal Trade Center for now. To create a climbing structure for the chimps, I stole the idea from the orangutan habitat and used multiple logs to create one larger, more durable one. I'm also going to yoink one of these hammocks and tie it on with some rope. Since these rope coils are a little too small for the log, I need to place a few of them to go all the way around. Again, chimps need a lot of enrichment. Unfortunately, enrichment items on this platform placed on the log that I made are inaccessible, but placed on this default climbable branch, they work just fine. Now, I keep getting this warning about chimps fighting for alpha status, but I can't find them fighting anywhere in the habitat. Multiple males and females should be able to live together just fine. So I'm not really sure what the problem is. The care manual actually says that fighting for status is quite common, at least at the start, and it's probably best to just let them sort it out amongst themselves. Anyway, if I place this climbable branch upside down, the enrichment item is still inaccessible. It needs to be placed right side up. But I think I'll just lower the whole thing instead. If we were to turn on animal terrain need in the settings, we would see that the size of this habitat is woefully inadequate, at least for the requirements of the game, even if in real life this might be considered plenty of space. We still need more enrichment items though. Trying to hide the metal base of this drum under the ground will just force the ground to lower, but placing a bit of path here temporarily will solve that problem. Oops, there's still a bit showing. There we go. This water isn't looking so clean. I forgot to place a water treatment thingy. And of course we need an electrical transformer too. And it looks like we've managed to make our enrichment items accessible to the chimps. Latif here just loves banging away at his keyboard. We can add some additional ways to get around the habitat. And some trees. As usual, I'll go with some common to this area that I don't think the animals would actually mind too much in real life, as well as some from their native habitat that we might actually be able to get to grow here. We've got to make sure they actually fit in the enclosure though. Maybe a tamarind tree? And then some smaller plants, mostly in the shady spots along the sides and underneath the enrichment items and climbing structures. These areas will also get a little bit of this low grass surface paint. This tall grass doesn't look great, but it's not so bad when blended in with this drin grass, especially when you use the dry version. And I almost forgot to put a roof on this thing, which I'll do right now. There's still a few changes I want to make, but you'll have to tune into the next episode to see that. Likes, comments, and subscribes are much appreciated, but you've already done so much just by watching this video to the end, so thank you very much for that. Stick around for a few closing cinematic shots. I'm Pylon John. Until next time, Free Palestine.